It was quiet until now, but right. Evening, everybody. It's dead on 6:30, so we will commence through the agenda this evening. And item 1 is apologies for absence. None received. Thank you. 2 is public questions and statements.
None received.
And I'm going to lose my voice in a minute. 3 is councillor questions or statements.
None were submitted.
Thank you. And 4 is minutes of the previous meeting, which seem, well, they were months ago, weren't they? But a long time ago. If somebody from that meeting is present tonight, if they could kindly, are you proposing, Jeremy? Proposing. Somebody wish to second? Thank you. Couldn't see if that was Patricia. Okay, thanks. All those in favour? Okay, thanks. They're passed. I will sign those at the end. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Moving on to item 5, declarations of interest. Anybody?
None have been received in through us.
Okay, thanks very much. 6, dispensations.
None were received.
In all the years I've sat here, I don't think anybody's ever had a dispensation, but yeah, maybe something to look at, I don't know. 7, chair's announcements. I don't have any. And moving on to 8, Janine, on the budget monitoring report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So this evening reports provide you with information regarding corporate and HR budget lines up to the end of January 2026. That's period 10. So Appendix A of the report you would have seen shows expenditure and income, and then Appendix B shows any variances over £25,000. The 2 to note in the report are software licenses and the salary and grants received for the vacant bid officer role. Obviously, if you have any further queries about that, please let me know. Otherwise, we'd recommend the committee notes the financial position, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. Do members have any questions at all? Bear in mind, this is, as in 5.1, to note. Any questions? Nobody? Ed.
I may have missed it somewhere else, but could you just, the grants received, was there something specific that we were expecting or hoping for? Was that a...
So my understanding was last year in bids and savings, there was a bid put forward to have a new bid officer role, but the role was always put forward as a cost neutral role. So there was always a line for within salary costs to accommodate that salary cost, but there was also another line within the budget that was income to offset those salary costs. So what's happened during this financial year, we haven't recruited that post, and that decision was made because we wanted to go through the whole JE process before we knew the actual true salary of the role and then could recruit to it. So we just haven't recruited to it. So we haven't spent that money, but we haven't made that money. So it's actually a zero, but it shows as a variance on the report. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions? Okay, so I'll move the recommendation to note if everybody's content. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Janine. And moving on to item 9, please, corporate update. Janine.
So just while I'm waiting for it to appear, this is probably one of the first ones we've done from corporate before. So I just thought, as this is the committee we now report to, it might be helpful to just give you a bit more insight of some of the areas that we're covering now within the department. So first slide, please, Asa. So procurement. So we've obviously, I've talked to you all before about procurement. We've obviously been working with Hampshire to update data procedures so we can have better best practice and improve our regulations, etc. You'll be aware that we've had training with managers and supervisors, budget holders, and obviously some subsequent training with councillors as well. So that's obviously helped build their confidence and awareness of what to do in terms of quotations and tender, the thresholds, etc. Off the back of that now, the next stage we're very much in at the moment is trying to really embed a better contract management processes within the organisation. So we've now got to a stage where we now have all our contracts published online as we should, anything over £5,000, and that's on an online portal, which also now provides us with reminders when they're due to expire. So we get good notice, whether that's 6 months, 9 months in advance. So we've got a good amount of time to properly go through the procurement process as we need to, and to be able to seek the best contract out there. And also we're trying to ensure that managers, when we are then awarding a contract, we're getting better at actually looking at the T's and C's of those contracts and having better, SLAs and response times and support, etc. And also periods where, if the contract isn't suitable, exit clauses, all those sorts of things. So get better at that sort of thing. And then with that, we can then monitor services better and identify the risks along the way. So that's our next step, is to really improve the contracts that we have and the monitoring of them. And overall, just hope the aim is to have better governance overall, be more transparent by having them published as we should, and more cost effective for the council. Okay, so that's procurement. So we've come to full council before to talk about IT projects. So just in summary again, just a reminder, during this financial year, we've had £50,000 allocated for cybersecurity. So IT manager has gone through a whole a very extensive list of improvements we needed to make, and I'm pleased to say he's worked his way through them. So some of the key areas was to update some of our infrastructure, so some of the actual physical equipment within the buildings, tighter on authentication, and obviously officer training as well. So now we've been thinking about the next sort of phases, and we're coming up with a IT sort of plan and roadmap, as it were, for the next couple of years, which I hope to share with councillors and then this year. But what we've got in our minds at the moment is during 26-27, we're looking to move a lot of our system to cloud-based systems if we can. I mentioned this again at full council, and some of the the improvements that would make in terms of costs and reliability, etc. And also in 27-28 is looking at improving our or having new HR and finance systems. And again, that's to improve how we can report, the automation of things, make things quicker, and just a better experience for staff in general who are using those systems. Excellent, thank you. So as you know, we've tried to review and look at our councillor support recently. We've created the intranet page even, which I think was a suggestion by yourself, Councillor Nettle, wasn't it, a little while ago. So we've set it up. It's the first version. So as I mentioned before, just skipping down to members' feedback. When I did contact you all with the link to the page, I did ask for feedback. Unfortunately, I haven't received any so far, but I would encourage councillor feedback. If there's anything that you would like to see on there, anything that you think would be beneficial to help you within your roles, then please get in contact with the team. As part of that as well was to extend our training programme, with some key areas such as procurement, as I mentioned, and there's GDPR, safeguarding, some of those sort of statutory duties and compliances that officers are having to ensure we adhere to, and then obviously extending out our awareness across the council to members also. And also there was some additional relevant optional training out there. I did print, I think, here. Unfortunately, I can't find it, but I think we had 12 sessions that we offered initially in February, and unfortunately we've only had 7 of the 24 councillors sign up to any training of any form. So again, I'll say it tonight, and I'll communicate it further, but I would really encourage members to take up the opportunity to attend any training, the statutory or optional, just to while it's available. And our next steps, what we're looking at internally, is we've been looking at our committee guidance, and we've created quite an extensive document now behind the scenes that we're trying to improve our processes internally. And with that, we want to try and support councillors further with committee guidance. So we hope to bring that to you shortly. And also, as I mentioned, we've got the intranet page, so let us know if there's anything else you'd like to see on there.
Janine,
Yes.
Thank you very much. Before I bring Jeremy was first, then Patricia.
Okay.
You mentioned councillors training just
Yes.
now. Slightly disappointed that only 7 out of 24, and I am of not that 7, shall I say, that's taken any training up. So include myself in the shameful rest that haven't done any training. You said mandatory training. What of that is mandatory training, and what is optional?
In my mind, I don't know if I used the word mandatory, but I think I strongly recommended or requested that members attended the safeguarding, GDPR and procurement, and also planning, which is obviously, I think all councillors would potentially find the first session very helpful, and that's actually happening tomorrow evening. It will be recorded, so we could circulate it afterwards to all members, because I think if you're ever substituting on the planning committee, I think it would be useful for you to attend that first session, and then we have subsequently 2 other sessions which are more in depth, but we've offered that out to all of the planning committee members.
Before I come to Jeremy, I'm just going to add to that, actually, because I did raise it with Asa last week. I don't know who's on the planning committee here, so I'm probably going to be unpopular. I think the training for planning for members should be mandatory. It is at Wiltshire Council. Even if you've been on it for many, many years, as I have, if you don't sit on it after the election, if you don't take the training, should I say, which this time was online, then you can't sit on the planning committee because too much members will think they don't take the neighbourhood plan into consideration potentially, or policies into consideration, and often make judgments of their own, what their brain's telling them. They don't like it because, and that's the opinion that they've got. And I probably think that the planning training should be mandatory for all members. I don't know how we can push that out. Probably, I don't know, over the next few months, but I don't know if somebody else wants to pick that up as well, but it's certainly something that should be mandatory for all members to take. Jeremy, then Patricia.
Yeah, Chair, I totally agree with you. And I wondered where we could put that in, and whether it's this committee that should make a recommendation or actually put in a motion for that, because planning is one of those things that if you do substitute, even if you're on the planning, things are changing. Environment legislation is changing, and you can't be expected to know all of that. But I think having some idea is very important. And actually what the purpose of seeing, because we're a consultee, so what is the purpose of Salisbury City Council seeing those? And we used to have a system that if there was a planning application within your ward, and there was 3 of you in your ward, one would look at, if it was near somebody, you would look at it, go along to the neighbours and check that they were happy with it, etc., etc. And the 3 of you would report, well, one person out of the 3 would report back, and one person out of the 3 was on the planning committee. But I don't know how, I think now it works is whoever thinks they like planning volunteer. So I do agree, some sort of mandatory training for those kind of, well, I think that's a classic one. One thing I've noticed, and I'm sort of asking my questions in reverse order because they're going, that's the way they're coming, is that if you're a school governor, training is not, is mandatory. And the key training is safeguarding and the other one you mentioned, sorry, I should know that. Anyway, there's 2 key, safeguarding and health and safety. And I think that is something we should be absolutely certain about, because we are representing the public, we are running public events as an organisation. But the way they do it is, as Janine has alluded to, is you're invited, and if you can't attend, you get the recording. But they can see if you've looked at the recording. Now, they can't see, obviously, if you've made a cup of tea and walked away and etc. and left it running. But let's just assume people are a little bit more sensible. But I think that's a great idea, because they have a record that you have done it. So if anything comes up and you've been involved in a particular issue, there's feedback on that. So I would highly recommend that kind of a system. So you invite people, if they don't attend, it's compulsory. If some of these subjects are compulsory or near mandatory, then this is a way of checking and doing that. and then you can find time to look at these things, and you know that you've got to see them. So that would be that. Now, my question when I put my hand up was right at the beginning, was about, and all of that is when we award contracts, in the idea of being open and transparent, do we advertise on our website who won that particular contract?
So now we don't do it on a website, we do it through the online portal that we use with Hampshire. So yes, we do. Yes. We have to,
because
there's various notices that you have to publish along the way through the process.
there are small businesses in Salisbury that seem to get quite irate that they didn't hear or didn't see or didn't know, and he's just smiling, so he's already bet them. but there is that, and I think as in the right life of being transparent, I'm glad that we're doing that. So thank you very much. And then my final one was, having worked for Larry Ellison for over 15 years. Sorry, he's the chief of Oracle. He used to say about systems in the cloud, just because you move systems into the cloud doesn't mean to say they're any easier to integrate. And I know the issues that we're looking at are all about integrations of payroll, et cetera, et cetera. And that's kept with me all those years. And I just think, I just say that, just be aware that just moving things to the cloud isn't something that's just going to happen overnight for the integration. But thank you.
Patricia, before I bring you in, and then John, God, I'm forgetting what I was going to say now, but I think just to make members aware then, reference the mandated training that if nobody's going to move it, I'll probably move something towards the end on planning, and it probably ought to be, I know the last lot, Ed will probably kick me if I'm wrong, but I don't know if you attended it, sorry, if you're not on the planning, I know, but if you're a sub, but I attended it remotely, which you could do. It was online, not face to face. We were away for the day, so I took my Wiltshire laptop and attended in a West Quay at Southampton, actually I was at the time, which was great. But you had to attend the meeting. You couldn't watch the recording to qualify for the qualification for it, so to speak. Not a qualification, but to tick the box at the end of it. Patricia, then John.
Thanks, Janine. I'm pleased to say that if there's only 7 people that have signed up for it, out of our group, 4 of our group signed up for it. So there's one for us. But also the other thing is, can you send out the link again? Sorry, for the intranet. Yeah, thank you.
John, thanks, Patricia.
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, before Jeremy spoke, with regard to mandatory and safeguarding, I was going to emphasise the point that as councillors, we engage constantly with the public, and we need to be fully aware of the safeguarding issues because we are in a position of responsibility. And although we don't have to address it, we should know how to refer it and when to refer it. It would be a really useful thing to do. I'm one of the 7, but I didn't attend because I put down for data, data security, and I wasn't intending to go to the planning meeting that night, but something from my ward specifically came up, so I had to go to that. Is it possible to send, if you put down for a training, could you send a direct link? I know it's spoon feeding us, but send a link to the recording, or is that just too difficult?
So the training that you signed up for is not delivered by us, it's delivered by Breakthrough Communications. So they will send any links out to you direct from themselves. And I don't know whether they record them, but there is another date available.
Okay, it's just, it is, to a certain extent, it's unpredictable. Things can pop up at the last minute that you have to do, and then you sort of miss that, and then you don't actually get the link to see the recordings. If that could happen, that'd be really useful.
Just to know, most of the training that we've offered out so far, obviously the procurement training was that particular session with Hampshire Procurement, but some of the others, I mean, the safeguarding, that's a go on any time. self-paced. It's about an hour long, so that there shouldn't be too many restrictions there in terms of completing that. The GDPR data protection, as Claire said, that's provided by Breakthrough Communications, who provide us with support services in that area. But I think they have one about once a month. So what we'll continue to do, and after we've done that, we've had this is what we've got between the end of Feb and April, we'll continue to contact you and let you know of subsequent dates for these types of training as the months go on.
Yeah, thanks, John, for that. Yeah, I did watch the procurement one online. I was commercial officers. It was good, refreshing training. Asa first, then Patricia again.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, would it be useful if officers took a paper to full council on this subject? I think Janine has been really polite this evening around the level of uptake of training. So I think that we as officers can be much more explicit on what we would like to see happen. I appreciate that councillors have very busy lives, but we have perhaps been very gentle, particularly around procurement, safeguarding, GDPR. Particularly safeguarding and GDPR, there are big legal ramifications. Planning, we think that's pretty much best practice if you're serving or looking to serve on that. And I field a lot of questions about procurement, and actually it's covered in the training, and that would help close off a number of conversations. So if committee are happy, we can draft a report. Chair, I'm happy to liaise with you on the content of that, and we can take that to full council for a discussion, and hopefully a clear decision by all members to say these training courses are really important. We would expect them to be undertaken, appreciating that we will be very clear that they are accessible in this way or that way, etc.
Yeah, before I come back, Jeremy, I'll bring Patricia and then yourself. Yeah, I'm content with that. I was trying to draw out from members if they were going to bring something forward, but we haven't finished talking about it yet. But I'm content with that approach. And I think actually, as one that didn't officially attend, I'm quite happy for you to list the 7, because I won't be on that list. To be honest, it might prompt members that haven't done any training to actually do some training. Patricia, then Jeremy.
Just really briefly, Janine, my understanding is, and it always was in my working career, was safeguarding doesn't last forever. So if anyone's sitting here, it was always for us 2 years. And so it had to be renewed. So if anyone's sitting here thinking, I know all about safeguarding because I did it 6 years ago, it won't be relevant. Thank you.
And as Asa mentioned, with these particular areas, legislation can change, etc. So yes, we would, like we do with officers, we'd recommend refreshers as and when required. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I mean, the mandatory training, for example, in my job, I work for the MOD, it's yearly, most of it, but 1 or 2 are every 2 years. So, but Jeremy.
Yeah, so Chair, I was just going to help propose that officers look at this and bring it back to full council.
I'll come back to Asa near the end for some responsible wording, should I say, to that motion. Thank you. Actually, that could be now. Looks like everybody's dried up. Does anybody else got anything to say?
There are a couple more slides.
Oh.
But I'll try and whiz through them. We are doing a little bit more as well. So just to mention civic events. So this year we're really trying to develop and grow our civic events. And you may have noticed at Charter Sunday, that was the first one of this year. And we extended it with having the Charter Market Fair present. And we're doing so to try and sort of strengthen our public engagement, create better experiences for all our guests and participants, and just raise the visibility of our civic events. Because I think a lot of the commercial business events, they're very front-facing. I think some of our civic events can feel to the public that they maybe perhaps take place behind closed doors. So we're trying to see where we can have that public element as well. And also we hopefully, with the success of civic events this year, all being well, that'll put us on a good, strong platform ready for Salisbury 800 as well. And last one, I believe. No, second to last, sorry. So policies. So you may remember back in October, I think it was the last committee, We brought the new policy and procedure management policy to the committee. So since then, we've been, so obviously the purpose of that was to make sure going forward we had consistencies across the board in terms of policies, procedures, the formatting, etc. So the stage of work through now is with each department, we've given them an up-to-date register of their policies within their department, asked them to review them, see whether policies need to be amended to split them up to procedures and policies so they're much clearer and easier to follow, or whether new policies need to be created, etc. And the forward plan now we've got an 18-month plan at the moment to schedule in policy reviews to come to committees as and when suitable. So we're really working hard with heads of service and managers to try and up our game in terms of our governance and our policies across the council. So that's another big area we're working on at the moment, and this is the last one. So this is the one that we're only just starting a big review on at the moment. So we've been working with breakthrough communication for a little while now, but this is my next big piece of work, is to have a data audit across the council. So it's been some time since we've had a look at all the data that we use, how we use it, and how we store it, etc., etc. From that, we'd have a big picture across the council of all the departments, how we use it, etc. And then from that, we can assess all the risks and the vulnerabilities. And after that, the next stage would be update our policies and our procedures to ensure, everything is up to date in terms of legislation, all our processes are more up to date, etc. Again, splitting them up. So policies are the headlines, procedures are easier for staff to follow, and then obviously we'd follow that with further staff training as well. So that's our next big piece of work in the department, and that is it, I promise.
Thank you, Janine, and apologies for leaping and thinking you'd finished the slides. But members got any other questions on the last 3 slides or whatever it was we saw? John.
Just a question about the actual process of reviewing policies. And how is that going to occur? Who's going to be involved in it? And how do we agree as a council whether they've been adequately reviewed?
So you may remember from when we created the new policy and procurement management policy, through the policy, it goes through how policies are reviewed, who reviews them, whether that's a head of service, the CEO. Then there was a document at the end which shows you when you have a policy, you review it and review what type of policy it is. So any that are, have legislation attached to them or higher risk, we'd categorise them as a type 1. They would predominantly come to full council, etc. If they were type 2, they'd go to the subsequent committee that they're related to, and then some of them would, perhaps I think all policies have to come to some sort of committee. But yes, that's how we type them, and then that's how we'd look to schedule them in for the appropriate committees. But that policy, which I can circulate again, details how we review them and how we decide the type and bring them to committee. Does that explain?
Yeah, that answers my question, because I wouldn't want to be bogged down by incessantly reviewing policies which don't necessarily change very much. And of course, obviously, if we do have an issue that arises which falls outside the policy, presumably a policy would be amended and agreed at that point, rather than waiting for the review to come through if you spot something that comes up.
Absolutely. And there's some that are, type 3, for example, we say sort of every 3 to 5 years. So that, unless something we were aware of changed in the legislation or the way we work as a council changed, then we'd obviously look to review that sooner. Yes, we'd absolutely do so. But
there was a very practical issue which arose recently where we decided as a council to ban the use of glyphosate. And then there was a suggestion that Wiltshire Council wanted to do some targeted spray using glyphosate, which conflicted with our own policy. So that probably, I think, is worthy of an amendment to the policy to enable that to happen in the city when we've actually agreed not to have any in the city. You see what I mean? It's a policy change that's probably enforced upon us, but it needs to be formalised at that point.
Yeah, I guess before I bring Jeremy in, that Asa would tell me if I'm wrong, but if a member thought that a policy could be amended, they could bring it.
Yes, Chair, absolutely. Very simply, members set policy, officers enact policy. So That means we deal with the procedures, etc., everything that sits beneath it. If there is lessons to be learned, we will bring forward a policy for amendments and learning. If there are changes in legislation or best practice, again, we would bring that back earlier. But I'm very, very clear there will need to be fingerprints of councillors over any policy consideration. That's the role that our elected members have.
So that probably sort of answers your question as well, John. Any other questions from members? Jeremy, I will keep inviting people, so.
I wasn't sure if you, like me, you forgot. No, I haven't forgotten. Just our document management system, let it inform us when policies are due for review. You know, in all the documents that you've shown us, you, in fact, they have dates on when they're reviewed and who reviewed them. But does the system generate a list of what's coming up for review?
Currently, no. So at the moment, all we have a corporate governance register, which has all our policies on, and it is an Excel spreadsheet at the moment. So it has our constitutional and then ones that are allocated to each department. So at the moment, we've created a review schedule off the back of that. When we're looking at the IT systems going forward, and we're looking at council support and services platform potentially, and that has multiple applications, and one of them could be a register for things like that, and where we could set reminders, etc. But at the moment, we don't have a system that does that, unfortunately.
So then, Mark bought some software to do a sort of review of when things need to be updated. So I wondered if you could use the same system, but sorry, I'm just going down a rabbit hole, but thank you.
Chair, just a general comment. We are looking forward to getting to 1997 with our IT systems. There are many applications out there at the moment that we're really excited to look at. The great news is that we've got a brilliant IT manager, supported by the corporate team, and I'm very excited in the next couple of weeks to see the first draft of this roadmap. That's really, really important for us, and see some great improvements. So looking forward to 1997, Janine.
Yeah, I think you've answered my question that I'm going to ask, Janine, because you mentioned on one of the earlier slides about cloud-based systems. I was going to say, I know the members portal that Jeremy has raised in the past is on SharePoint, which is Microsoft. Is that what you're looking at then, a potential Microsoft, to use SharePoint more? But you may have just answered that by saying this other system that you're looking at.
So previously we moved. So we used to have. We still do have EDMS, so the document storage system. So the first thing we moved was the actual documents, which we've done. We've moved our documents away from that system into SharePoint, as you know now, using the line. The part that we haven't been able to move yet is part of the finance system. So that's where we currently raise purchase order numbers. So until we can have a fully integrated finance system, which can create the purchase orders, raise the invoices, etc., we can't do away with EDMS. And that system, unfortunately, is a little bit costly for us still at the moment, and it is hardware, not cloud-based. So that's the biggest shift that we're hoping to make. And once we've moved over that element of the finance system over to a new system, we will be able to then do away with that. And that should, and I think when I came to full council and reported on the IT, we sort of talked about some of the hopeful future savings for that as well.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I'm not seeing any other hands go up, so I think it's to note what you've said to us, which is brilliant. Thank you very much. Asa, sorry.
Chair, just in terms of a recommendation, I appreciate it's to note. Would it be useful, I've just come up with a brief form of words, the CEO in liaison with the Chair of Governance draft a report for full council to consider clear guidelines on mandatory and optional councillor training.
So, yeah, okay, Jeremy's going to officially move that. Can somebody second it from the committee? Patricia? Okay, does anybody want to comment on that? We've had a thorough chat to death, shall I say, on this item. But okay, let's put that to the vote then. If everybody's content, all those in favour, please raise your hands. Put my hand up as well. Okay, that's everybody, I think. So thank you. Yep, brilliant. Asa, look forward to that coming to council.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is it complaints? Sorry, have I lost one? It is it?
Complaints.
Complaints. Item 10, sorry, complaints. That is Janine as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So as I mentioned, we're now reviewing our policies in detail. So this is the first one I'm bringing to committee. So we've had a look at the complaints policy and the managing and reasonable complainant behaviour policy. So previously we had a complaints procedure that was published online, etc. It was actually called a policy. So I'll start with the complaints policy itself. So what we've done is we've split them up. We've created a policy which we're bringing to you tonight. And then we've created a more in-depth operational complaints procedure document that we use internally to deal with complaints. As you'll see in the in Appendix A, any major updates were in blue and new text was in red. So if you've got any queries about any of those amendments, please ask. And the main aim was to make it much clearer and to actually have a complaints policy rather than just a procedure. So that's the first one. I did provide the complaints procedure as well for reference, so you could see the difference between the policy and the procedure. The second one then is the managing unreasonable complainant behaviour policy. So this previously was called the dealing with abusive, persistent and vexatious complainants and complaints. Very lengthy wording. One of the big changes for this is to have a shift in terminology. So sort of the new title and the new wording we try to use in the policy focus was more on the specific actions that may hinder the organisation rather than the person themselves or their character. There's quite a bit of new text in there. That's in red. That's highlighted in red. Some of the new text we've included is clearer guidance on what the council considers as unacceptable behaviour or communication. We've clearly broken down the stages. So when we have a persistent or unreasonable complainant, we go through a number of stages in terms of how we manage communication with them, etc. And we've also considered in this new policy any data protection obligations or any reasonable adjustments we may need to make when dealing with complainants. We've got some small changes as well. They're in blue, so that's changing, as I say, the policy name, some of the terminology, and also changing who manages the policy. So obviously, if you've got any questions, please let me know. But the recommendation is to approve the updated and renamed complaints policy and approve the revised and renamed managing unreasonable complainant and behaviour policy. Thank you.
Janine, before I bring Ted, then Jeremy in, can I just say how, for a simpleton like me, this is very, very clear, highlighting everything in red and blue, what has been recommended to change. Both policies probably were more than long overdue, probably drafted in 2009, I guess, and that may not have changed since. They have changed a few times, apologies. But drafted in 2015, sorry, was the complaints policy. And I'm well aware that obviously over the period that the council does get, I can't use the word vexation today. What was the...
Unreasonable.
Unreasonable, that's the word, yeah. Stepped in it. So yeah, it's I completely agree with what's before us. I'll hear what other members have got to say, but I'm happy to move the recommendation before anybody speaks, which is 5.11 to approve the updated and renamed complaints policy, because that's what it is. It's had a refresh, and approve the revised at 5.12 and approve the revised and renamed managing unreasonable complainant behaviour policy. Phew, got that out. Right, thanks. Who did I say first? It was Ted, then Jeremy, then John.
It is purely and simply, I looked at that and I wondered what it refers to. But other than that, great.
I think that word needs to change from procedure to policy, isn't it?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks. No, this is absolutely great policy, so well done. The changes. Interesting that we've changed to vectatious to MUC. That's easy to say. Could you just go to the bottom after the final warning and all the rest of it? It's just that some of us in this council have been accosted by MUC residents. I can remember one that used to approach every mayor that was elected with the same question. I obviously can't go into detail about that. And then if he didn't get it from the answer from the mayor, he would go to the then leader. And so suddenly you had two people involved in this. And what was happening is we were just going a bit round in circles because we were reliving every decision. And I couldn't remember when I read it, and I looked at it and to see if that mentioned it. But is the leader of the council or the mayor involved in the final stages of this or in the review?
Yes.
If the council hasn't given adequate...
Yes, so as you might remember, Councillor Dalton and Councillor Wells, at each stage we would contact the chair of this committee, the leader of the council and the chairman as well, to inform them of the details of what's happened to date and our recommendation for implementing this, whatever stage we're at within the process.
So, yes, I did read that then. So the point of that, and that's why I raised the question. So at the end of that process, if the MUC doesn't feel he's had a good deal, where does he go to next? Is that the Ombudsman, Wiltshire Council? Because what was happening before in the policy is officers would deal with it, and then if there was no satisfaction, then either the leader or the mayor used to get involved. Whether we like that or not, but that was the way it seemed to go. So what's the procedure then? Because if we're going through, if members have been involved in the processes, in the stages, when the final decision is made, where does the applicant go after that? Or the MUC, sorry.
Bring Ace in.
Thank you, Chair. The applicant then could move towards the monitoring officer. The monitor officer on behalf of this council is based at Wiltshire. In real life examples, that has happened.
Yes.
There is a clear conversation with the monitoring officer. If the monitoring officer says there is no case to answer, then there is no case to answer. You could go to the local government ombudsman, but the short version is there's very scant response that you get from them. What then tends to happen is, my personal experience is they tend to try and have conversations with other people, such as our local MP. Yeah. In those circumstances, we have good relationships and regular discussions so that we can say, look, we've applied this process without giving, detail or breaking GDPR, but here's the process that we've walked through. This is what we've done. Here are the appeals that have been considered. And that then deals with that process.
So I suppose what I'm asking is, should we mention Wiltshire Council at the end of this if the applicant is unsatisfied, or is that just a different conversation?
So we have included it in the body of the main complaints policy. So there is a section in the complaints policy that does talk about what if you're not satisfied and what happens in that instance. Yeah. So the complaints policy sort of sits above the behaviour policy. That's sort of the next stage. We'd always deal with it with the complaints policy first, and then if we needed to look at it further because we felt it was unreasonable behaviour, we'd then move to the secondary policy.
Yep, that's
Yeah.
perfect. Thank
Okay.
you very much.
Thank you.
And I think, just to better say that I think if this policy is effectively watertight, that it's brought up to date as it is now, because I think it's been out of date for some considerable time, then you go to the monitoring officer or they complain to the monitoring officer. The first thing they're going to ask is what policy is in place at the parish council or whatever. Clearly, if there isn't one, then something hits the fan, I guess. But if there is one and you've gone through the process, then there's probably no case to answer because elected members have been involved in the process, which is what you've outlined there. Does anybody else have any? Yeah, John, sorry, then Patricia.
Yeah, it's a point very much related to that. What happens if? Completely approve of the policy, but I don't know whether it's part of the policy or whether it's good practice anyway. That there's a paper trail demonstrating that each stage has been addressed, so that anything that comes back externally, you've got evidence to say, well, this is stage one, we followed our policy. With anything to do with grievance and disciplinary action, if you miss a stage out, the whole thing gets thrown out and you have to start all over again, and it gets really messy then because you're trying to dig back into the past for something that's already happened. So does that need to be stated in the policy that we'll keep a paper trail, or is that just part of the process?
There is a record keeping section at the end of the policy. Yeah, so that's why that was one of my main amendments, was to try and clearly break up the stages, because it was a little bit, it wasn't very clear previously about which stage at what point you implemented each stage. It was sort of, we're using our judgment up to this point, but I tried to make it clearer as to when we would apply each stage. And then yes, the point 8 in the policy is about record keeping and the things we should maintain and record as part of the process.
And one other point is it could be beneficial to councillors to have access to, shall we say, serial offenders, because I remember giving one particular resident a lot of airtime and brought them in to meet one of the officers, when in fact previously they had been in conflict with an officer and reprimanded and so forth. I'm not saying that they shouldn't listen to their complaint, but I might have managed it in a slightly different way if I'd known that that person had had some sort of restriction placed prior to it.
Chair, if I may, there is a difference between somebody who has had the policy applied to them, and we are very clear to appropriately let people know that has happened, and there will be a discussion, part of that in tonight's exempt status reports. We have to be very careful that if the policy hasn't been applied, that members of the public are still able to contact their elected representatives.
Mm-hmm.
That's really, really key. So if a line is crossed, we would be clear to share that appropriately. But if it hasn't, and as annoying as that might be, it's absolutely their legal right to do so in a functioning democracy.
Anybody got any other questions? I think I did move. I don't know if anybody wants to jump in a second. I'm just going to raise it here, Janine. I did ask Ace about this, and well, there's no public here, but I'm not going to say any names anyway. And I know when you go through the stages, right, okay, you go through the stages that you write to said person, but do you say on that letter when they're effectively blocked for 6 months that their unblocked date is within that letter? So
Yes, well, we say the date commences from, and the period,
Okay.
and the end date, yes.
Do you then write back to inform them that they're now past that 6 month
Yes,
date?
so yeah, part of the process in here is to inform them if there's a review and what the outcome of that review may be.
Okay. My
Yes.
question follow-up is, do we need to do that? Is what I was going to try and get at. If you've already stated it in the first letter,
Mhm.
do we need to then inform the person that they can now write to the council again and possibly
Yes.
go through stage 1, 2 and 3 again?
Yes, that's part of what I would do when I review after the 6 months. Yes, yeah. I would contact them again after the
I'm
review
just wondering
period.
if we need to. That's
The question is, should we? Are we
Oh, should we?
inviting further
Okay.
problem by then letting
okay.
them know, because we've already written to them? We are very polite at the moment, and we do let them know that the period has passed. Is there a legal requirement to do so? Probably not. We can investigate that. I appreciate what you're saying, Chair. Are we going to invite more conversation when we've already told them when the period is up? If it's okay, we'll take that away with us and report back to committee members.
I've only raised that because you let said person know on the letter when you're blocking them for 6 months, and why do you need to write back and let them know again when you've already told them is the
Oh,
point.
To
So,
be clear, well, actually, to be clear, what we currently state is the complainant will be informed of the result of the review, and if the decision to apply the policy to them has been changed or extended. So we do currently say, as I say, we inform them of the result and whether we've changed or extended it as well. So yes, it's part of it at the moment, but can review whether we feel we should
yeah, can
do
I
so.
ask that?
Yeah.
If I don't know, do you need a vote on it, or do you need content to?
We're happy to check the legal status of that and come back.
Members happy with that? Yeah, okay, thanks. Okay, so I've moved the recommendation 511512 to somebody. What, second? Patricia? All those in favour? Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you, Janine.
Thank you very much.
So item 11 on the agenda is training update report, and that's Tracy.
Thank you. So this report's for noting, but I did want to just clarify one point because it does appear a bit confusing when I'm talking about requesting a carry forward. I'm advising councillors of that, and we would follow our usual carry forward process, which goes through the RFO and CEO. So I'm not asking for permission for that. This is just a to note report, really. But basically, the aim of this report is to cover what we've been doing in relation to training. So obviously, it's really important to make sure that the staff that we've got are able to do the jobs that we need them to do. And after quite a few years of very limited investment, 2025 was the first year that we've had a staff development budget that kind of adequately covers what we need. So this year was, or the year that we're just about to end, was about catching up and putting foundations in place for next year as well. But what that did mean is that we've had hundreds of completed training assessments, whether or not that's online e-learning or whether or not that's face-to-face training, and also some professional qualifications as well as a 6-session senior management team leadership development programme. So I've put in there the various different topics that we've covered, but one of the things that I just wanted to highlight is that 93 of our staff have done their e-learning around sexual harassment, because one of the rules that changed is about preventing sexual harassment in the workplace now. So, we've had a really good uptake of that. But next year moves a kind of shift away from this catching up to having a more systematic approach. So using our job evaluation processes that we've been through, making sure that we target development needs in terms of where we need them, making sure that we have both pre and post learning objective meetings to evidence the impact, and extending that management development from the senior management team to our lower levels of management as well. And looking at how we onboard and induct our staff. So, we've got what hopefully is quite a busy, productive year in terms of staff development. So are there any areas that you'd like me to clarify?
Yeah, just as we said for councillors, is it mandatory training for all staff?
Is what mandatory?
The two that you mentioned, they got 93%.
Yes, 90. So we have a whole programme of various different courses that are mandatory for staff. They include things like basic health and safety, inclusion, safeguarding, sexual harassment awareness. There's an additional one for managers. There'll be some around GDPR. So we've got a whole mandatory element, and some of those get refreshed at different periods. Some of them are refreshed every year, others every 3 years.
So I'll ask the question a different way then.
Oh, sorry.
Because I appreciate that, and when I read the report. So are there training programs, or how many training programs are there for 100% of the staff? Is there a training program that all staff has to go through?
Yeah, so those are our mandatory courses.
Right. So why have we only got 93%?
No, 93 staff have done it. So basically it's...
Sorry,
yeah.
My apologies.
Yeah.
Chair, I'm just thinking in future reports, because I was really excited to see some data around here on volume, and perhaps what might be useful in future reports is if we have a percentage uptake, because, for example, our procurement training, whilst the headcount is only 22, Actually, my understanding is pretty much 22 was the full cohort there. So that should, to give you comfort, that should be 100%. Whereas you're probably interested to know that actually which of those courses where the full cohort hasn't been delivered.
Sorry, just as we were just about to propose that councils have mandatory training, I just want to ensure that all staff, if they have to have mandatory training, do attend. That was all my intention. Thank you.
I would imagine, I'll bring Sam then John in, but I'd imagine if they don't, they would certainly have their line manager on their back within a set period of time if they don't conduct that, as I would. Sam.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, good report. Good to see the data. I think it's good to see this sort of data. I have two questions. And I guess the first one is, it would be helpful in the future, if possible, to get an understanding of where we're getting value for money here. We've got some stuff which is mandatory health and safety, yeah, fine. If we're getting council officers who are taking on upskilling in a way that means we no longer have to outsource, we can know sort of where that return on investment eventually will come, just to sort of qualify this. I think it's a good idea either way to invest in people, but it would be good to get some numbers on that. And sort of related to that, where we've got significant upskilling of officers, is there any, just call it like clawback in terms of if someone does a qualification and then immediately leaves, we've invested a lot in that person. So do we have anything that says if you leave within 6 months, you have to repay us?
So I'll answer the second question first, which is yes. So basically any course or series of courses which is more than £500, unless it's a mandatory course. So for example, our waste management courses, we've told our staff to do those. So we don't include those in a tie-in, but any course that's over 500, we get a training tie-in. And that normally looks at, a kind of year period and a kind of percentage paid back if you leave after. Yeah, exactly that. And in relation to the value for money one, I'm not entirely sure what the question was, but what I'd like to answer is that, one of the things that we're doing, so when we did job evaluation, we looked at what is the job that the council needs from this post holder, not necessarily what the post holder was doing at the time. So at the moment, we're still potentially on a bit of catch up there in, kind of filling that gap between what the person's currently be doing, which was what the expectation was, versus what we need to move in the future. But, if we do have areas where we've upskilled, meaning that we no longer need maybe consultation support or things like that, I can definitely put some numbers to those kind of things. But, at the moment, it's more about getting people to the level that we need the job done for, because previously the training was first aid or manual handling, and that was about it. So we've had a lot of years to kind of catch up on.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that is the question, is around if we are training people, that allows us to not have to get in resource, external resource, sort of. It's not a question for now, obviously, but it'd be interesting to see in the future. So,
and that's the point about having a more formal pre and post course discussion to make sure that we are really clear on why we're doing this course, not just because I've put my hand up and I said I want to do it, but actually because there's a business need for us to do it.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add to that, 2 points. Probably just 2 examples of that. So in terms of planning, one of our officers we are investing in terms of master's level qualification, because we can see increased growth in the area of planning, the need for expert advice. And if we want to secure that, you're looking at, 100 quid plus an hour for planning advice, whereas investing a considerable amount of money, and that particular officer is currently in Germany this week as part of their qualification. That for me is really fantastic. That's a simple cost benefit analysis there. We have other examples of our facilities team through our new contracts, actually, where they have now been trained to undertake certification of certain, for example, water levels. So again, we can give that information in future. The other thing, just to add in, as part of, as always, there is a flow chart that we have to follow, that managers follow. And I think we mentioned it at least 3 times today in senior management team. There is a training flow chart And as part of that process, there is a pre-application for training and a post-training review where, again, managers and staff pop down exactly what the benefit of that course has been, including whether or not they think the provider has been any good as well. So we do capture that information. How we appropriately pass that on is something for us to work on in future. But we do, if those two examples give you some comfort, Councillor.
John, then Ed.
Yes, I'm just thinking about a slightly different aspect to training, and I understand that there are statutory things that we need training for, and lots of training comes in the form of an accredited course, etc., etc. But what I'm also interested in, and it comes more into the process of performance management and appraisal, where you may have somebody that's in a role where they have specific skills that they might learn from a colleague. So I'm looking at sort of in-house training, which doesn't have to be vague and woolly. It can be something that comes out of a performance review where there's a specific aspect of that person's role that they don't feel quite so confident with, but you have expertise within your own staff to work alongside, which is cost effective. And as a teacher myself, I also appreciate the fact if you do have skills and knowledge, it actually consolidates your own skills and knowledge if you have to explain it to somebody else. So I think that needs to be acknowledged, even though it may not appear in the data, it might appear at some point in that person's profile in terms of their training.
Thank you, John. Ed.
Thank you. Oh, is that on? Yeah. Yeah, I'm all for training, especially if there's good cost benefit analysis involved in it. I think that's obviously very important because I've certainly been on plenty of work training courses that I don't think have delivered a huge amount of benefit, but I'm sure that these are a lot better. I've just got a quick question. The interpreter costs, could somebody tell me what that's about?
Absolutely. So this kind of goes in as a cost, but we actually get it back as well through the Access to Work scheme. So basically, if somebody's got a need, so in this case, it's British Sign Language. So in order to access the face-to-face learning, we bring in an interpreter that does British Sign Language. We pay the money, and at the moment, we haven't actually had it back yet because there's quite a lag with the Access to Work scheme. So that's why it's declared as a cost.
Fair enough. Good answer.
Any other members? Okay, thank you, Tracy. In which case I will move recommendations 8.11 to note the contents of the report, seconded by Jeremy. Thank you very much. And moving on to item 12, Tracy, again, the year in review.
Thank you. You're going to get a bit bored with me. I think I've got 4 reports. So again, this is a report to note, and this is the idea of bringing this report to councillors is to kind of give a bit of a health check really about the organisation across a few areas. So the areas that I'm kind of going to go through are the honoraria. So we've actually got an honorarium policy. In the report, I described how much money we've issued out to in respect to honorariums to people. And what I noticed as a result of doing that check is that we were using it in a very reactive way. It was as a result of management vacancies and filling gaps. So although that's great that we've got staff that are willing and able to kind of mitigate that gap for a while, it also told me that we're not using honoraria in a way that could be about exceptional performance, for example, or succession planning, or thinking about how we consider deputising and those kind of things. So I think over the next year, I'd like to work with the senior management team to, just ensure that we are thinking a bit more about things like succession planning and deputising when necessary. The second part of the report is to talk about the formal HR cases. So 20 cases may or may not sound a lot to you, but I just wanted to put that into a context that is kind of what I would expect. If we had 0, almost that might suggest that we're not dealing with some issues. So, we do expect to have some kind of cases that we look at, and this, concerns everything from disciplinary, attendance and performance. So, the idea of letting you know this is to let you know that we are dealing with things consistently and lawfully, including things like attendance, because you'll notice that there were some in there that had no further action, and that's about the fact that we're considering things on a case-by-case basis rather than just applying a broad brush across a number of areas. So third, the report looks at the issue of mental health and stress, and that's a very, kind of high priority interest for us. So in April, we're going to be doing an organisational plan for the stress risk assessments. So usually we do our HSE stress risk assessment organisational pulse survey, but we're going to do something a bit different this year where we're going to promote every manager to do their yearly stress survey or stress risk assessment with an individual. So the idea of that is that people are having actual meaningful conversations, identifying where the potential stressors are, and then going to put in place measures to kind of mitigate those stresses. And finally, the levers themes, the themes are there for you to see. And one of the things that I'm also going to be working on with the senior management team this year, which hopefully is music to your ears, Councillor, is about performance management and making sure that we have an effective way of kind of improving performance. I'm really excited about some ideas that we've got and that, I've been talking to ASA about, to try and make sure that almost performance improvement plans are a thing that everybody has rather than a thing that we only have if there's a problem. So, hopefully, again, that's going to help with some of those levers themes there. But just to let you know that we did also have 2 internal promotions, which, does show that people are moving through grades as well. So, so are there any questions?
John?
The question of exit interviews intrigues me because I encountered this at Wiltshire Council level where it was apparent that the uptake of exit interviews was significantly low, so that people weren't completing them. What's the uptake of exit interviews within this organisation?
So we try and offer a variety of ways, either a face-to-face with our HR manager or a written kind of questionnaire that they can return to us, just so that people have got preferences. And our uptake is pretty good. I mean, I would imagine that we get something like 80 or 90%. We don't have a huge amount of leavers, so, we can kind of focus on ones and twos. So we're in a different position than Wiltshire that's probably got lots per month. So, our HR manager does proactively say, I haven't got your exit interview, is there a reason? And, may give the person a phone call. So again, there's every opportunity for people to feed in how they're, viewing things and why they're leaving.
The fact that you're offering 2 options is quite healthy and probably helps the uptake. But I would even go so far as to say is that you emphasise how important that is to the organisation. And that exit interview could be conducted during their working hours as part of their role, just to encourage people to do it. That's a significantly higher response rate than Wiltshire Council, as far as I'm aware. But I think if you make an effort, it's quite difficult to persuade somebody leaving a post that it's important, but it's important to the organisation because that will help with all sorts of issues to do with staff well-being, recruitment, retention, all the other issues that affect turnover of staff. But I think that's a pretty good response already. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, John. Any other members have questions? No? Okay, so I'll move 7.1, please, to note the report. Thank you, Tracy. And moving on to item 13, the Employment Rights Act changes.
Yes, so this particular issue is keeping HR people very busy, probably especially employment lawyers, because it's basically the biggest change to employment law over, probably a generation. So the reason for bringing this report is because the first phase of changes starts on the 6th of April, really. I mean, there were some last year, but, they don't really affect us because they were more to do with trade unions. But I just wanted to kind of give you reassurance, really, because what I was hoping is to bring you the suite of policies and explain how they change. And I just want to tell you why I'm not standing here with those. But first and foremost, the main change in April is around some family-friendly policies. This is around under day 1 right for people to take paternity leave and unpaid parental leave. So although I'm not standing here with the policy, we will be implementing those changes to make sure that we comply with statutory regulations. So the reason I'm not standing here with a suite of reports, is that once I started looking, I was expecting to just do the kind of basic changes. But what I found was that unfortunately some of our policies were out of date. So the reason this surprised me is because our reports went up every year to our employment lawyers to, review and make sure that they were that they'd covered all of the changes. And for whatever reason, I don't know why, they weren't kind of highlighted or changed. So we've still got some old legislation in there. Now, that's not a problem in itself because, the kind of policy, when somebody wants to take some family-friendly leave, they'll phone up HR and we'll tell them what the actual kind of situation is. So we've not complied with law, but what we have got to do is I've now got to update a suite of probably about 22 policies, because there's about 22 policies that the Employment Rights Act is kind of touching. So that's why it's not a kind of straightforward job that I can give you tonight. But what I do want to do is just reassure you again that we will be making sure that we meet those legal obligations of what the Employment Rights Act is changing. And then in July, I'll be bringing you the reports, and you can decide whether or not you want to change any of those terms and conditions in line with standing orders, because quite a lot of them, the statutory entitlement is still quite low. As councillors, you might want to up that, or you might not want to, but in the interim I'll be applying the statutory rules. So that's the employment rights policies. I was also just wanting to update you about a separate issue raised by a councillor regarding our trans inclusion policy. And a question was raised as to whether or not our trans inclusion policy is legally compliant. So I've had a look at that, and because and this is about workplace toilets for our staff. So this is just about staff. This isn't about anything wider than that. Because our current facilities are fully lockable, self-contained rooms, they already meet the health and safety law, which says about biological gender. So, however, the policy itself will be kept under constant review because this is a complex and very changeable area of law, and there are two competing sides that make it quite difficult for employers to actually comply with the law, because it depends which law you look at, because they're conflicting. So we are going to be looking at it, but I just want to give you reassurance that we are compliant. I've taken legal advice about our toilet provision. So are there any questions?
Tracy, thank you. And just to stress, this is not just on Salisbury City Council. This is a national policy change for everybody to adhere to. Questions from anybody? I don't. Ed, go on.
My only question is just a slight concern about the fact that these policies being checked by lawyers who then obviously weren't checking them properly. I assume we're now using different lawyers, are we? And
so I can answer that question. We're stopping using them from the 1st of April, mainly because it wasn't really serving the council's interest in the wider scheme, in terms of their advice, because they underwrote their advice with insurance. It was extremely risk adverse, to the point where you could struggle with interpreting the law. That was before I realised about these policy things. So, we're not using them from the 1st of April, and yeah.
Okay, I can see no other hands up, so I will move the recommendations at 311, which is to note the report. Tracy, thank you very much. On the Employment Rights Act changes, item 13. So moving on to 14, which is the HR data.
Lovely. So this hopefully is a kind of visual report that you're used to seeing, because this kind of gives an overview of where we are in terms of things like turnover and sickness. So there were just two main points to note in this, in terms of, you might notice that the recruitment vacancy time is up slightly in the last quarter. That's partly because of Christmas, because obviously things tend to slow down a little bit over Christmas. But again, to give you reassurance that where there are changes that we need to make sure that we're as effective as possible, we're kind of looking at that and making sure that the process is as good as possible. But we just do need to bear in mind that this year now there's going to be a managed vacancy target. So of course, it's not going to be as easy as how quickly did we fill that vacancy. We're going to also have to take into account, do we pause that vacancy because of the managed vacancy targets? This is going to quite a changeable picture. So what I propose is that I'll be giving councillors information about what we've intentionally paused and what and avoidable delay, so you can kind of see, because we will be introducing delay in order to make sure that we meet the vacancy target where necessary. The other thing to highlight was about sickness absence had risen, but if you look at the information, it was more around long-term sickness, and that kind of was around 2 particular individuals. But actually, I'm really pleased to report that the sickness for short term is actually the lowest that it's been for a year. So, you know, what I'm hoping is that that's as a result of the efforts and attention that we've been working with managers around the importance of those return to work interviews, about the importance of sickness absence review meetings, you know, using occupational health and kind of, you know, making sure that we are seeing it as a whole picture. So are there any questions?
Members, any questions? Jeremy.
Yeah, I must admit, I don't think I've got that level of detail at the moment, but I can. It probably was, yeah.
Everybody stayed at home, didn't they? But, okay, thank you for that. There's no further questions, so I will move the recommendation at 511 to note the contents of the report. Tracy, thank you very much. So moving on to item 15, so the exempt items, exclusion of press and public. I move, as on the agenda, to move into exempt information for the reasons given on the reports. If I have a seconder, please. Sam, thank you very much, Sam Charleston. So we are now in exempt, but I think I need to wait a moment.
Thank you, Chair.